Hi, so this video is the lecture on feminist theory. And the first thing I'd like to say is that even though it originated during the women's movement, the equal rights movement, and that was and is a primary focus. Um, I fully believe that this video is not just for women. It's for everybody. It is for women, men, all different gender identities. It is, other than family systems theory, uh, feminist theory is one that I use the most for individuals having relationship problems. And I'll go into why I use this so much. So I believe that, we've come a long way for equal rights and equality, but we have a long way to go as well. It is an ongoing challenge. And I believe that just as this theory teaches that all counselors should be advocates for positive things that affect individuals' emotional welfare. That includes empowerment, equality, non-judgment, acceptance, helping people to find appropriate gender identity roles or gender roles. So I'm going to go over this theory with you, but I'm also going to share a bit about how I use this theory. And it might seem a little strange. I am I'm over 50. I'm a white male, upper middle class professor. And yet, I'm teaching this theory on feminism. And I used to teach the multicultural course as well. One of the most important parts of multicultural counseling or diversity or feminist theory is first to look at our own biases and to understand who we are as individuals and then as counselors. So the very first part of any of this is to look at ourselves and see, hey, well, maybe I need to work on some things. I think everybody has biases, and it's not like, oh, I've worked on that, no more biases. No, it's an ongoing thing, we can always become more aware. We can always work on something, you know. But we also have to take the effort to continue that process honestly. Okay, so and I also want to say that I think this theory is good for males and females. It's good for any gender identity. LGBTQI, so I think that as we move through this, I think it can apply to basically anybody. All right. So there's for this theory, there's not a single individual that is responsible for the development of feminist theory because think about it, in the 60s, there was a large equal rights movement, first of all, for minorities, um, and equal rights, but also for women. And I think that a lot of that movement throughout the 60s, um, played into all different areas of our society, and as a result, all different disciplines. Um, so, uh, one of those disciplines is, of course, counseling. So, not just one person, lots of people contributed to this theory. Jean Miller, Carolyn Enns, Olivia Espin, Laura Brown. These are a few of the more well-known people who have contributed to this theory, in case you want to read any of their publications. Women therapists decided to participate in consciousness-raising groups, which felt that it was more efficient for women to free themselves from role constraints through the use of self-help. So the therapy groups are non-hierarchical, and even though they talk about groups, groups are a big part of this theory, group therapy. But it's also individual therapy. It's not just groups. But, everything, the counseling session, the therapy groups, even if it's individual counseling between the client and the therapist, it's non-hierarchical. Equal sharing of resources, power, the empowerment of women. Individual therapy is viewed as a partnership between equals. There are 4 feminist philosophies, and I'm just going to go over these philosophies because they might be on a future exam. Okay, so the liberal feminist. It's a focus on helping women over some of the limits and constraints of their socialization patterns. Goals include personal empowerment, dignity, self-fulfillment, and equality. Cultural feminist. Oppression is the result of societal devaluation of women's strengths. The goal is to infuse society with values based on cooperation. The radical feminist looks at the oppression of women embedded in patriarchy. Their goal is to transform gender relationships, societal institutions, and women's sexual procreative self-determinations. And the socialist feminist, the position is that there are multiple oppressions and solutions to problems, which should include class, race, and other discrimination. The goal is to transform social relationships. So in spite of the various philosophical orientations, and I would imagine it includes all of those, not just choosing one of them, in spite of the various philosophical orientations of feminist therapists, it's believed that empowerment of the client and societal changes are crucial goals in therapy. The traditional theories have several gender-biased elements. However, the feminist theory differs in that. And so, good examples of those would be Freud, definitely gender biases. We discussed that. So the older theories, lots of biases. Part of it was the time period in which they wrote. Part of it was mostly male theorists, white upper class or upper middle class theorists. Um, so, uh, so feminist theory, gender free, because it explains gender differences in terms of socialization processes rather than on the basis of true nature. Flexible, because the strategies used are applied equally to individuals or groups in spite of age, race, culture, gender, or sexual orientation. Interactionist, which includes dimensions of human experience such as thinking, feeling, and behaving, giving account for contextual and environmental factors. And the lifespan perspective assumes that human development is a lifelong process, and personality patterns and behavioral changes can occur at any time throughout that process. Let's look at personality development. Feminist theorists or therapists believe that because of societal expectations placed on gender roles, so gender role expectations, a person's identity is influenced from birth through adulthood. They recognize that women tend to search for connectedness with others, while men tend to move towards separation. I believe that could be genetic, but it also could be more societal and environmentally learned for both men and women. The self in relation theory states that a woman's sense of self depends largely on how she connects with others. Women expect that a mutual and an empathic relationship will enhance development and self-knowledge. The relationship that a female forms with her mother is a significant model of other relationships. Another viewpoint on the personality development of women is gender schema theory. This theory notes the perceptual sets we use when looking at society and our place within it, which place limits on both genders. An example is that a female must behave in a certain way to be considered feminine, and boys display a certain behavior to be considered masculine. And all of those are expectations in order to be seen a certain way or to be accepted as masculine or feminine. The engendered lives concept maintains that gender is organizing principle in people's lives. Gender plays a role in shaping the identities of men and women and defines the masculine and the feminine. Society has labeled men as the dominant group, and they determine roles that women play. Women are placed in a subordinate position, and they are expected to interpret the needs and behaviors of men, which has resulted in women's intuition. And these are all just previous theories. I think we've moved beyond these even. So let's talk about gender roles. And this is where I want to give some personal examples. I know that my father was in the military his entire life, and so served in World War II, and then and my mother took on traditional roles. Um, Although for her time, I believe she was quite progressive. Um, and, but I know that both of those, both of their roles and how they saw them and how they interacted influenced me growing up. And I had to look at how that influenced me in my life and ask myself, well, is this what I want for myself? Am I basing, who I am? Uh, do I need to be seen as masculine, or do I need to, whatever, in order to be accepted? What about the more emotional side? So here's some examples. Um, and I don't believe in these. I'm just giving you examples of things that we need to address. Society might say to a young boy, hey, big boys don't cry. So it's teaching males to suppress that emotional side. And yet women are expected by society often to be more emotional or nurturing or something like that. Um, Assertiveness or aggressiveness versus, the opposite of that. Um, what is considered masculine? Well, I think, a well-rounded, caring person, is would make a good individual. So anyway, so I looked at all of these messages that I was just brought up getting, these messages about roles and gender and feminism, well, femininity and masculinity and who I needed to be, and when I started thinking about this, I'm like, wow, I don't want to buy into that. And I'll tell you what, first, the first thing was when I was in my master's degree and was in some more serious relationships um, and learning about all of this. And I'm like, well, hey, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to have to live up to certain expectations. And I don't want the people I care about to have to live up to expectations. Who am I really? So that I went through a lot of self-exploration, you know. I think spending time in another culture as well um, can also change some of those gender role stereotypes and those expectations, um, like men holding hands. When I was in India, and uh, it was normal for males to hold hands who were friends. Um, and and I think that that contact with male friends, and it was the same for women. Women held hands with women. Um, we're missing that in our culture. There's this separation, this taboo for simple things like that. Um, so, first of all, was my master's degree, just like you, and some self examination and going to other cultures and experiencing that. And, just opening my eyes and doing some self examination. Um, and then the next big part of my life was having children, both male and female, daughters and sons. And here's the interesting thing: no matter how hard my wife and I try to be gender neutral, So like we'll paint their room yellow or green. We're not going to paint it pink or blue. Um, their toys, uh, girls don't have to have Barbies, and boys don't have to have, trucks. They can have whatever they want. And I noticed that no matter how hard we tried, it was impossible to uh, shield them from societal influences that were still gender biased. Um, now, but we explained to them, hey, it's up to you. You know, you can like whatever you like. You can be whoever you want to be. Um, so we never placed values upon them. They have they have freedom to decide who they are. Um, and so, first daughter uh, was very stereotypical, uh, but by her choice. She wanted everything pink. Well, okay, if that's what you want. She likes playing with Barbies and just starting using makeup and all that good stuff, but that's her choice. My first son is you know very into Ninjago and Legos and uh, what is stereotypical for our society for a young boy. But once again, his choice. Our third child, a daughter, is in between. She likes things that are stereotypically masculine, but also likes things that are stereotypically female. That's great too. She has a balance. The fourth child, we're leaving things open for him too. He's only 3, um, you know, and he hasn't really started evaluating. I'm sure unconsciously he has. So let me talk a little bit about gender role in therapy. So it doesn't matter, I could see individuals, who have grown up with a certain gender role message, and they want to explore that. Great. Um, so, but I also saw couples, and I saw um, all forms of couples. I saw male and female couples, male and male, female and female, the whole spectrum of gender identities. Um, and uh, and that's different for every individual. But no matter what that couple uh, included as far as gender identity, every person grew up with different gender role messages. So we can't just assume anything. We have to get to know that individual and help explore the messages each one of them received. What do they believe? What did they buy into? What would they like to change? Often, uh, that's where turmoil is created because people grow up with different gender role messages. And then when their gender role messages don't match in a relationship, then that creates some incongruency in that relationship. So we need to process that, and communicating that with one another really helps. Um, and I think females receive gender roles messages growing up, and males do too. And some of them are positive, but a lot of them are negative for both. And uh, if somebody is going through, um, growing up in a different gender identity, so that is less typical, but certainly always acceptable. Um, but they may receive more criticism from family and society. So LGBT, um, however an individual identifies, they may feel, and everybody feels differently, so I'm not assuming anything, but they may feel as though they don't fit certain roles and they do fit others, and that might not match other people's expectations. Well, you know what? It doesn't have to. And other people have to learn to accept that. It's not on the individual to change. But that's often what society or families insist upon. So that's part of this process in therapy to figure out, well, what messages did we receive? What do I want to accept? Who am I? Who do I want to be? Can you accept me for who I am? All of these things go into this. And I think it applies to everybody, not just women. Um, you know, not just heterosexual women, all men, anybody, however you identify. So here it says challenging traditional roles for women. And I would say we need to challenge traditional roles for everybody. Not only can women have a career and raise a child if they want to, but men can also help to raise that child, uh, you know, and experience a more emotional level. So I think it applies to everybody. But women are expected to be more kind, thoughtful, caring, nurturing than men. Well, and men would be expected to be less thoughtful, caring, nurturing. So that's not good for either gender. Uh, Women are not expected to display independence or assertiveness because they are viewed as taking on masculine roles. Women are seen as being emotional and intuitive. Women are labeled as submissive, passive, home-oriented, and indecisive. Now, none of these things are good. I'm not saying they're good. These are things that need societal change, this stereotypes. When women don't behave in these ways, they are viewed as unfeminine. Women are viewed to naturally have an interest in relationships versus accomplishments. They are expected to maintain relationships rather than competing or striving to get ahead. So all of these are stereotypes which are incorrect. That's what the theory is saying. And we need to address that. And I would say there are just as many for males and, all gender orientations, gender identities. So what I would like you to do for the discussion post, what messages did you receive growing up, either from your family of origin or from society? And do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Just explore that a little bit and discuss what you would like, whatever you would like to share with us. And then we have 5 principles of feminist psychology, key concepts. The personal is political. The fundamental goal of feminist theory is social transformation. Societal reorganization frees men and women from the constraints placed by gender role expectations. The counseling relationship is egalitarian. The client is acknowledged as authoritative and a valuable source of knowledge. The client actively participates in defining themselves, while the therapist is another source of information and not the expert. The client and therapist share power. That's very Rogerian, I think. Women's experiences are honored in order to understand their distress. The goal of therapy is to replace the patriarchal objective truth with feminist consciousness that acknowledges a diverse way of knowing. Reformulate the meanings of distress and mental illness. Intrapsychic and interpersonal experiences are only a part of the explanation for the pain. Distress is seen as communication about an unjust system, while pain is seen as evidence of resistance and the skill and will to survive. The use of an integrated analysis of oppression. The therapist recognizes that women and men are affected by a culture in which they were reared, where the sexes are differentially privileged. And then here are some therapeutic goals. Become aware of their own gender role socialization process, identify their internalized gender role messages, and replace it with their own constructive beliefs. Understand how sexist and oppressive societal beliefs influence them in negative ways. Learn skills that will promote change in society. Develop a variety of behaviors that are freely chosen. There's a little discussion about the role of the therapist, about clients' experience, and you can read that. And then there are feminist therapy techniques. Gender role intervention examines the context of society's role expectations for women. Clients provided with insight into the ways that social issues are affecting their problems. This will lead the client to understanding how these expectations have affected their psychological conditions. That's a pretty important one. Power analysis and power intervention help the client to become aware of power the client possesses, and interventions are aimed at helping the client to love herself unconditionally and regain self-confidence. It's a good one. Bibliotherapy, self-disclosure, assertiveness training, all of those very, very good techniques. I would not use them on an exam because they're fairly basic. Reframing and relabeling consideration is given to social factors in the environment that contribute to the client's problem. Focus is shifted off of the client. Relabeling is an intervention in which the client is helped to change negative labels that they have attached to themselves to more positive ones. Women's groups are used to help women experience a sense of connectedness with other women. Once again, women's groups, fantastic. It's also fairly basic. So try to use some of those other techniques that are a little more involved for your exam. All right, I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please email me.